Makes me look tall. So the irony isn't lost on me that today is neatly sandwiched between World Quaker Day, which was last Sunday, and National Coming Out Day, which is this coming Tuesday. I thought, well, this makes quite an interesting reflection for today. The World Quaker Day was actually started rather recently in 2014 by the Friends World Committee on Consultation, if you need some more Quaker abbreviations, FWCC. And
we need to publish a glossary.
Yeah, there you go. It was a day that was intended to raise awareness and to celebrate the diversity of Quakers around the world, because we are incredibly diverse in peoples and in practices. And really, that's FWCC's goal, is to bring Quakers of all ilks together. This year's theme of World Quaker Day is Ubuntu, which is the word used by South African Nguni peoples to convey this sense of compassion, connection to humanity. Loosely translated, it means I am because you are. In other words, without me, without you, I wouldn't be me. And conversely, without me, you wouldn't be you. For those of you who are unfamiliar with National Coming Out Day, you may be wondering, well, what's the big deal about that? It's not a trick by the American Tourist Board to get you out of your house finally after COVID and go traveling. Nor is it I always think of debutantes and their white gloves and dresses and their tiaras. Their coming out parties. It's not that either. For the past 25 years, National Coming Out Day has been the day that the LGBTQI plus community calls out its own out into the world. We're called out of the closet in which society puts us, our friends, our families, our jobs, our religions, shut the door and lock it. But we're called out to be honest about the essence of who we really are. For me, National Coming Out Day, though, is not just about people who are private or hiding their sexual preferences or their gender expressions, or to simply put it, hiding who they love. All of us, I think, have a truth we're not telling about ourselves. And coming out is simply about being true to yourself, despite of and in the face of the risks you would encounter to do so. I think of the courage for you to be on the stage. That's courage, to be all of who you are. Coming out is when we stop hiding who we are, first and foremost from ourselves. I have a friend who said, I learned a lot of myself first. And then coming out to ourselves, to others. And in the spirit of Ubuntu, we can be more fully present to those who can help shape us when we are out with the truth of who we really are. For some people, the truth of that they had to come out to is major force in their lives. I hearken back to the history, the shared history of the three major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It springs from the story of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. Every single person in this story had a truth that they had to come out to in order to fulfill who they really were. And out of those truths, once they were told, as hard as they were born, and the stories continued of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The same is true for Buddhists and Baptists and Methodists and Lutherans and Quakers. Who would we be today if George Fox had not first questioned what he'd been taught to be true and then come out with a truth that was very different from the Christian practices of his time? If you think about it, he had to tell somebody. We certainly wouldn't be celebrating World Quaker Day if George Fox had not shared the truth that had been given to him up there on Pendle Hill. The modern era has just as many coming out stories. Gandhi, Martin King, Mother Teresa. She was just like George Fox, wealthy, and said, there's got to be more. They all lived up to the truth of who they really are. Their courage to come out with that truth changed the world's history in a big way. But coming out at first can seem like a really small step. Rosa Parks admitted that she wasn't thinking of starting a boycott that would eventually end up in the United States Supreme Court when she was one of only 4 Negroes who refused to give up their seat, a row of seats, to a solitary white man in 1955. She said, I was just tired. But once I made that decision, I knew I had the strength of the ancestors behind me. Ubuntu. Gives me chills. World-renowned folk artist Grandma Anne Mary Moses spent her teen years and adult years at the end of the 19th century working as a domestic. And you may remember that term. A domestic was a live-in housekeeper at the age of 12. That was what she was doing. And later on, she became a farming wife. But by the time she was 76, because arthritis had crippled her hands so terribly, she began to look for a new hobby to replace her love for embroidery, which is very fun work. She began painting scenes on cardboard from old Currier and Ives prints. She later started painting scenes from her own childhood, and she sold her paintings for around $3 a piece. Before her death, 25 years later, at the age of 101, Grandma Moses had created over 3,600 paintings. And she enjoyed international notoriety as one of the most respected and favorite primitive artists. In 2006, one of her $3 paintings sold for $1.2 million. And it was just because she wanted to find a new hobby. Both these women made choices from simple needs that they didn't intend would impact the whole world. They were just seeking to fulfill in some way something inside of themselves that needed expression. So while their risky actions might have garnered criticism or stirred up a culture, they were supported by a compassionate community in which they found encouragement. But before you get overwhelmed by those bigger than life examples, I want us to kind of focus the microscope in a little tighter to see what's realistic to us. Let's look first at the minute choices we make every day that help us hide who we are. There's a lot of work that goes into that sometimes. How many of you have decided quietly within yourself just not to say something or do something out of fear of judgment from your friends or your family, your co-workers, or maybe even someone sitting in this very room? We often think it's more important to fit in than it is to express ourselves honestly and clearly. And that's understandable when we have difficult relationships. It's easier to ignore that than to confront it. And that is a choice, especially in a coming out story. You have to choose and be intentional about how you do it. But are we living our truth when we choose not to speak or express ourselves? Or maybe I'm thinking there's a bucket list of things you've been wanting to do. They just kind of tug at your heart, but you haven't gotten around to them. I used to have a little wooden circle that was around to it, and you haven't gotten around to it. Maybe the reason that you're held back is that you think there's not time, and you just need to put it on your calendar, your full day, or schedule an appointment with yourself. Is it a need for safety and security? That's fair. You have to weigh that. But sometimes security can become a weighted blanket that's hard to climb out from under. Are you afraid of the unknown? Or maybe intimidated by the fact that it would be the first time you're trying something? I have a friend who gets really upset at herself if she can't do something perfectly the first time. And so she doesn't try new things very often. So we're called into a theology of risk when we commit to living our highest truth. In practicing a theology of risk, we risk knowing the outcome. We risk all guarantees of what we define as success. God's business is risky business because it calls us to give up control of what might happen. We might risk something and come up in the middle of it and come up short of what we thought it was going to be. Or we might go through 4 years of crazy like Winston-Salem accompanied me at one time. As willing participants in co-creation of our lives, we change our paths forever, and maybe the paths of others, when we accept a higher call to fully expressing our authentic selves. Answering our call doesn't have any guarantees. There's no immunity from the realities of life. Like the Christian scriptures say, it rains on the good and the bad, and the just and the unjust alike. There's no promise that the light at the end of the tunnel is always going to be visible. You may have a lot of work ahead of you. And on the other side of that, maybe you're called into being Ubuntu. You are called to be a compassionate connection for someone else. I will never forget the day, gosh, it touches me in my heart, that in 2002, my second year of seminary, I'm going to present my first message in chapel at seminary. And so I'm back in the back preparing, meeting for worship in the manner of friends for all of these friends of mine, colleagues. And someone comes up to me and said, there's a woman here who says she knows you and she's here for chapel. And believe it or not, it was Judith Dancy. I'd not met her. I had no idea who she was. I still to this day don't know how she knew I had chapel. But she was there to be my Ubuntu and has been in all those 21 years since then, been an ardent support and compassionate connection for me. The endless examples from history show us what happens when we live out our truth, either out into the world or being a compassionate connection, encourager to someone. In the end is authenticity and fullness of self, that life more abundant that we were promised. I always think of the example of Jesus being, look, you can be your full self. They can, like my grandmother used to say, they can chew you up and spit you out, but they can't kill you. They may think they killed you, but they can't. That is a life more abundant. And surrounding ourselves like Jesus did, with people who will support us, maybe cheer us on, or even bring out the best in who we are because we can't see it. We gain energy for the road ahead when the light at the end of the tunnel isn't visible. So, I'm going to always ask, what about you? What truth do you have to tell yourself? Maybe it's just a little one. Maybe it's just, I'm tired. If you were to come out to your authentic self, as your authentic self, what would it look like? Are you willing to venture into the wilderness of uncertainty like Hagar? Are you willing to risk whatever it takes for you to become your true self? At this point, this place in time, sandwiched between World Quaker Day and National Coming Out Day, are you willing to engage in God's risky business? If you are, I have 2 pieces of advice to give you. First is, surround yourself with Ubuntu. Find the people who can support you, encourage you, hold you up when you are too tired. And second is, despite the risk, despite the unknowns, and despite the outcomes, come out to whomever you are. And so it is. Amen.